Welcome back to Bumblebee for today's video on the top 10 messed up traditions queens still follow today. Tradition number 10 is no jail time. Many queens enjoy what's called sovereign immunity, which essentially means they cannot commit a legal wrong and are immune from civil or criminal proceedings. Let's say, for example, the late Queen Elizabeth iron knuckles a guy in the mouth, Deadpool style, because her tea was too chilly, and it causes a visceral spray of blood and a need for orbital surgery. And let's say she committed this armed attack in front of her entire family on Christmas. What happens to the Queen? Prosecutors could go after the crown as executive, but then the Queen's ministers would act on her behalf and accept any punishment that was doled out for her. While this immunity extends to other British heads of state during their time in office, the Queen is protected for life, since that's how long she holds her position. And she did. So what other monarchy other than the British has this criminal immunity? Belgium's constitution states the king is violable and his ministers are accountable too, as does Denmark's. And since 1848, the Dutch constitution states the king is immune from prosecution, the ministers are responsible. The constitution of Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Sweden all have sovereign immunity, but without holding the ministers accountable. If a crime is committed, everyone just walks away scot-free. In places like Iceland, meanwhile, their queen can only be prosecuted with consent of parliament, and in India, no legal action can be taken against their leader as long as they're holding office, but you can get them impeached then sue, so that's something. Tradition number 9 is animal hoarding. I've always hated hearing people discuss how the British queen or king, whoever is on the throne, just owns all the fishes royale. So animals like whales, dolphins, sturgeons, porpoises, and even swans, thanks to a year 1300 rule. These guys are out here completely splashing around free and clear and completely unaware that they're owned by any petty human laws. However, owning a horde of pets is quite different, and Elizabeth and her corgis are nowhere near the first ruling monarch to start that tradition or build laws to protect them. Hippos were royal family animals back in ancient times of Egypt and were protected by law for centuries. Dogs, however, seem to have struck the hearts of European nobility. Mary, Queen of Scots, spent her life with dogs and loved them so much that she had hers legally licensed and protected, keeping them with her through her exile and imprisonment, and even her most adored lapdog was found in her petticoat just minutes after her head was chopped off. Charles II of England loved spaniels just like how Elizabeth loves corgis. In 1685, the writer John Evelyn wrote in his diary that Charles loved having a number of little spaniels follow him and lie in the bedchamber, and when the old king died there, it was surrounded by the beloved dogs. Versailles, home to the Bourbon King of France from 1682 to 1789, was filthy and attracted rats. So what did they have? Cats. Too many cats. One day, Louis XVI went to his commode, unaware that one of his Angora cats had curled up in the porcelain bowl below. And to quote, when events galvanized the cat into attacking the sovereign from below, a dazed Louis fled, stockings in hand, ringing all the bell pulls. And who could forget Josephine, the wife of Napoleon, who literally started her own private zoo. Tradition number 8 is royal baby Easel. This one is locked into just British monarchy, and it's more weird than messed up. The first person to learn of a new young royal's arrival to the world must be the queen. Hands down, no debate, even if a king is in the picture. But when it's time to share the news with the world, well, out comes the ceremonial golden easel and the poster board, set up smack dab outside Buckingham Palace. When Prince Louis was born in April of 2018, it was put on the same easel that announced his father, Prince William's arrival in 1982. Historically, the notices are handwritten, but today they're typed out with the time and birth just penned in. Tradition number 7 is continuing patronage. Being a queen comes with a Bible, even if you aren't religious by any means or Christian. This was just set in stone as a tradition by the olden time of ergot-riddled bread and corporal punishment for showing your ankles. So naturally, we still have it in place today because they knew best back then. Alrighty, anyways, the act of patronage, and specifically religious patronage, was very important during the Middle Ages. It became an active area of queenship studies because it was pretty much one of the only ways that queens could exert great influence. While religious patronage included the founding of religious institutions that could signal political alliances at the same time. Margaret of France, Isabella of France, and Philippa of Hainault, for example, were all patrons of Greyfriars Church in London, but that patronage was also connected to their mutual Capetian ties, the dynasty of France. With religion often shared between countries, even at times of war, it could be used manipulatively to bring bridges of truce. Being on good terms with the church could always be beneficial to medieval queens in other ways too. For example, when Joan of England refused to pay Benegaria of Navarre the pension she was owed as the Queen Dowager and widow of Richard I, Pope Innocent III intervened on her behalf and told him to cough it up in a humble and religious way. This also earned queens consolidations as saints, even sometimes after their passing. Tradition number 6 is following blueprint. Remember Meghan having the Christmas dinner at the Windsor family with her mother and the whole awkward addressing of the getting weighed before and after eating thing? If Meghan was to follow the blueprint, she would have never stated anything about it. Rather, thank the queen for the meal and the proof that her belly is full. Now obviously it's pretty effed tradition and good on Meghan for not taking that crap, but following the blueprint has been so driven into monarchy, especially female monarchy, that even the public was upset with her. To follow the blueprint is to mimic the royal woman above you, especially should you be in the presence or potentially one day taking their role. Who created the blueprint of what a medieval queen should be and how she should behave? Not any one person. Ancient Egypt felt a queen should be a certain way. Ancient Rome that a queen should stay silent. Ancient Mesoamerica, a queen was equivalent to a king and did whatever he did. It varies per culture and thus every monarchy system created its own blueprint. Within this, there was literature specifically aimed at princesses and queens within their applicable regions. For instance, Joan I of Navarre's confessor, Durand de Champagne, wrote a text named Mirror for Ladies, which advised Joan on how to be a good queen to her husband, Philip of France, in the bedroom. In China, biographies of ancient queens provided examples of rulers whose behavior was to be modeled, as well as those deemed to be a bad influence, aka your do's and don'ts book. Italian-French author Christine de Pizan's book, The Treasure of the City of Ladies, dedicated to Margaret of Burgundy, also aimed to instruct women of all classes on how to present themselves. Tradition number 5 is dress code. Inevitably, within the blueprint will be the dressing guidelines. While they have become lax in recent years for most kingdoms, and women are able to have more control on their garb and no longer have to wear 30 unnecessary layers, they still have certain restrictions. For example, there's the endless tabloid attention paid to the Spanish royals for their level of chic. Queen Letizia has openly broken dress code several times. In 2015, when delivering the flag to the 11th National Teach Zone of the Civil Guard, she broke the mandatory dress code of wearing all black and a Spanish mantilla in favor of a short and incredibly stylish white ensemble. It also violated tradition by being an outfit repeat. She wore the same white getup to her husband's proclamation as king. I can't talk about dress code violation without mentioning our baby girl Princess Diana, who had the stuffy Brits flying out of their knee-high tube socks over her sweaters and bike shorts. Meghan was also highly criticized in recent years for challenging dress code, which is prudish and bland at best in England. You aren't allowed bright nail polish, and the now deceased queen forbid ladies from trousers at social events, and you had to own those big stupid hats. Tradition number 4 is pretty pressure. Essentially, queens were expected to be the ultimate good woman, a model of virtuous behavior. They were expected to be good wives and mothers as well as good rulers, but they were also meant to be pious peacemakers and to look pretty, but not so pretty you don't want to respect them, but also still pretty enough you want to pay attention. Think about that Barbie monologue. That naturally comes with the endless critique. Beauty was obviously a huge part of a queen's role, and they were expected to represent contemporary ideals. William Caxton, in his 15th century book, The Game and Play of Chess, states that the queen ought to be a fair lady, sitting in their chair and crowned with a corone on her head and clad with cloth of gold. She should also, he writes, take care to be chaste, wise, of honest life, and well-mannered. It's interesting that beauty is the very first quality that Caxton names in his text, and we can see this in other sources of medieval eras, such as the Welsh Triads, or the 13th century Las Diet Patridias, Kingdom Law book, where it's written that the qualities that kings should look for in a bride is the more beautiful the queen is, the more the king will love her, and the more handsome their children will be. No mention of being a good political leader. So it's really interesting again, seeing how these ideals of queenship tied together. Alfonso was basically equating the idea that a beautiful woman will make a good wife and a good mother, which takes us back full circle to those expectations of medieval queens to be everything. Tradition number 3 is tax exemption. This one sucks. Imagine you happen to be born in random luck of the draw bloodline and just don't have to pay taxes. Quite a few countries had laws in regards to their leaders, be it king or queen, being exempt from tax. Queen Elizabeth wasn't required, and now neither is Charles. However, Elizabeth had been voluntarily paying income and capital gain taxes since 1992. Her grandsons are also paying their taxes but do not have to. King Juan Carlos, Spain's former monarch, has paid about $820,000 in back taxes amid an investigation by prosecutors into whether he and other royal members of the royal family used bank accounts in other people's names to hide assets from tax authorities. The payment announcement came just a month after the Spanish media revealed an investigation into possible tax evasion, and that occurred after Juan abdicated in 2014 and was no longer shielded by immunity from prosecution. The extent of that immunity has become an issue in previous corruption cases, but it remains an unsettled question. The Belgian royal family no longer holds any power, but receives large payments for their advisements and roles as, not to be rude, figureheads. These payments are always taxed, as are the family. Dutch royals are among the monarchies exempt from paying income tax still. Last year, the Prime Minister Mark Rutte rejected opposition demands to scrap the exemption. His government proposed an annual royal budget of £50.2 million for 2023, untaxed. Tradition number 2 is no ID needed. Royal prerogative is a special exemption statute from certain statute laws. England is famous for allowing its queen or king the right to no driver's license, no upholding of speed limits, and traveling without needing of a passport. That means even though Queen Elizabeth preferred to stick to driving on her private estates, she could technically go speeding around London and running red lights if she wanted to. Japan's Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako are also exempt, as stated in a ministry document dated for May 10th of 1971. Apparently, it would be highly inappropriate to issue a passport to the emperor or empress. The document also stated that it will be highly inappropriate for the emperor to undergo immigration or visa procedures using a passport as an ordinary citizen. The Dutch head of state, similar to Elizabeth, does not require a passport for the reason that all passports in his country are technically issued by him. So it'd be funny for the king to have a passport where he himself has to ask for permission to allow himself into another country. Tradition number 1 is 2 birthdays. The 2 birthday tradition for British monarch dates back to 1748 when King George II combined the annual summer military march with his birthday celebration, which should have been during the winter, as to quote, with a November birthday being too cold for celebratory parades, he tied his celebration in with the annual Trooping of the Color military parade. Trooping the Color, a military parade, has its origins on the battlefield. A regime flag or colors was a key rallying point for soldiers during battle, so obviously you got recognized around flag. To ensure soldiers would recognize it, the flag was marched around, aka trooped, for the ranks to see. A regiment's colors came to have huge significance for serving soldiers, and the gain or loss of colors were seen as decisive moments in battle. Nowadays, since it also doubles as a birthday party where the kid invited his whole class, the marching of troops is a spectacular and boring display of 1,400 parading soldiers, 400 horses, and 400 musicians. The monarch arrives at the beginning, looks over the troop, the band performs, the bagpipe guys proceed to make an obtrusive wall of noise, and then they all start marching. The royal carriage follows along. Alright, thank you for tuning in to another Bumblebee video. Take some time to subscribe to the Hive to see some more of them, and I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe to see more from us, and I'll see you next time.